I've been on a vegan diet for over a year now, but technically it is a whole food plant-based diet. And in this video, I want to talk about why I got started, how it's going so far, and how you can choose to incorporate a bit of it into your life without any of the crazy parts. And we will talk about protein as well. Boy, am I in hot waters in this video. So let's talk about why I decided to go on a whole food plant-based diet. I've been exercising quite a bit since years now, and I also like to do regular blood work to just see how the blood markers are doing. And when I did start doing this, I used to see that my cholesterol levels and the bad fats in my blood used to be quite high, and this was quite surprising given the active lifestyle that I led. This got me wondering, I'm not that high in body fat percentage, I'm not super muscular, but I am lean, and given that this is how I lead my lifestyle and these are what the blood reports say, what is the mismatch here? At the time I would eat all kinds of meat. On top of that, the dairy, the eggs and the fish, all of that, I would happily consume it for the protein and such. And this was the time I came across the documentary The Game Changers. And in The Game Changers, they talk about people who were just like me. They were athletes and they were professional athletes who used to consume meat and dairy, etc. on a regular basis. And their blood work had the same sort of reports that mine did, where the blood work would paint a completely different picture compared to what they thought. And when I saw the people in this movie switching over to a plant-based diet, I started to see the results they were having, and that's when I realized, maybe this is something that I should try. Cut to the chase, about 4 or 5 months later, and my cholesterol levels had also dropped, and since then they have never risen, no matter whatever dietary changes I've made. You should go watch The Game Changers, by the way. The number of health benefits these people are reporting are outstanding. Now, when I was consuming meat, I was very well aware of the suffering that these animals would go through. These birds, the hens, would be cooped up in cages and just crammed in there, and it looked like the soul has been sucked out of them, especially when you compare it to a bird that is out and just free roaming. And on top of that, I would even see sometimes where these birds would get their feet tied up and hung across the side of a bike or something like that, just for people to transport them that way. And that sort of suffering is heartbreaking. But the way I used to see it was, for an animal to survive, another life must die. For one life to survive and to eat and thrive, another life must die. I didn't appreciate the suffering, of course, but I did think that whether you choose to eat a plant-based diet or an animal-based diet, or of course an omnivore diet, combining the two, something or another had to die, in which case plants also die. This isn't the case for most plants, by the way. For most plants, they don't need to kill another life for them to survive. They get most of what they want through either the soil or the sun, but that's a whole separate video. But then I started to realize I have never seen plants suffer the way that animals suffer when they are alive. I understand that plants must also die for us to be able to consume them and eat them, but all of that suffering can at least be avoided. Additionally, I heard all of the arguments supporting a vegan diet, such as the food usage to support all of the animals, the livestock, the water usage, the climate change benefits that would come along with a vegan diet if people were to switch to one. But I also heard of another thing, which is one person cannot make a difference. That means if you individually decide to go on a vegan diet and don't eat animals, etc., you cannot really make much of a difference. And then I just decided to do some math on this one. I'm a very active person, so my protein requirements are higher than usual. Let's say on average I eat 2 whole chickens in a week. Let's extrapolate that from 20 years up until, let's say, 60 years. 40 years times 52 weeks times 2 hens every single week is about 4,100 hens. Even if you half that number for a normal human, or even a fourth, you're still left with 1,000 hens over a lifetime. That's your lifetime, not to mention all of the eggs, the dairy, etc. that you end up saving in a process. So when I did this math, I was no longer convinced by the argument that one person alone cannot make a difference. A whole food plant-based diet is how I refer to my diet, as opposed to calling it a vegan diet, because I prefer to have my foods as close to possible as the plants that produce them. I realize that this is not always the case. For example, breads, chapatis are things that aren't really as close as possible to the wheat that produces them. But the hope is always to be as close as possible to the plants that produce them. I'm not really doing this for the animals, even though I spent a whole bunch of time a little while ago talking about the benefits that the climate, the animals might achieve. by switching to a diet like this. I am purely doing it for the health reasons that such a diet affords me. And this reason to want to stick to as close as possible to whatever the plant produces is the reason why I choose whole foods over things like orange juices, apple juices, things like that, where the entire fiber and any of the nutrients that might be there in the solid portion of the food has completely been removed. So that's another reason why I stick to a whole food plant-based diet as opposed to calling it a vegan diet, where an orange juice does qualify, but I always prefer eating the whole orange. Another reason why I don't like calling it a vegan diet is because it implies that I also care about cosmetics and things like that not being animal tested and being cruelty free, which I just think is a bunch of BS. So I just avoid the term vegan diet as much as possible, but people do tend to know what a vegan diet is, and hence sometimes I just refer to it as, hey, can I get the vegan option? People would love for you to go extreme with this whole setup, but I'm here to tell you that you really don't need to do that. You don't need to up and quit everything, dairy, meat, eggs, one day finally and say, from now on I'm on a vegan diet. You can instead choose to go gradually about it. You can instead choose to eat a whole food plant-based diet on one day of the week and then maybe gradually increase to about 3 days a week. And let's just take that number for example. Even if you ate on a whole food plant-based diet for half a days of the week, so let's say Monday to Wednesday or Monday to Thursday, and if we revisit that number of 1,000 hens being saved over your lifetime, that is still 500 hens that you are saving over your lifetime. So if that is the only argument that is holding you back, that one person can't make a difference, here's another reason. You don't really need to go all the way extreme. You can only switch to it half a week or a couple of days or whatever it is that you can manage. And next, let's talk about milk, and I'm specifically talking about dairy. People usually know of a lot of other people who are lactose intolerant, and I get that. If you are lactose intolerant, then of course you've switched to other means of consuming your milk. But people who think that they aren't lactose intolerant, and I am one of those people, tend to think that, their body can handle milk just fine. But as for me at least, my body gets used to milk. Now let's say I haven't drank milk in a very long time. If tomorrow I decide to have, let's say, a glass of milk, that will mess up my body. And I will have that same effect for the next 3-4 days. I'm not sure how long it takes now, given that I've been away from it for such a long time. But when I used to not consume milk for a while when I was having dairy, I would take a while to get accustomed to the milk again before I can just consume it on a regular basis. So that got me thinking, people who think that they aren't lactose intolerant, is it just the case that their bodies have just adapted to this? And if you are adapting to something, you don't adapt to something that is good for you. You typically adapt to something that is bad for you. So I have this challenge for you. If you think that you aren't lactose intolerant, just quit milk for about 2 weeks. So no milk in your tea, coffee or anything like that. No milk at all, no lactose, nothing like that for about 2 weeks. And then try and reintroduce it back into your system, and then try and pay close attention to how your digestive system reacts. Are you still sure about the fact that you aren't lactose intolerant? And what about the costs? Isn't being vegan more costly than being in an omnivore diet? Well, yes, if you choose to pursue vegan alternatives to foods that you eat. So if you consume a vegan ice cream, I would assume it's more expensive than a non-vegan ice cream, just regular dairy. But the trick is to not try and do this, to not try and chase vegan foods on a daily basis. Now I understand that vegan milk is something that a lot of people want. I in fact consume it on a daily basis. I use soy milk on a daily basis whenever I need to in my breakfast. And if I ever need to, I ferment some soy-based vegan curd right here at home. And I typically just don't chase any of these vegan butters, vegan meat and all of that. I've tried it out. It does seem okay, but I'm not really seeking it out that much. And I prefer to eat the whole food rather than this vegan meat, vegan butter, manufactured foods. On a daily basis, the only vegan alternative that I consume is soy milk, which yes, is more expensive than cow's milk. I'm sorry, I should be calling it soy-based beverage. Sorry, milk industry. As for meat eaters, all my friends are non-vegans. They eat meat in various different capacities, and I have no problem with people who eat meat. In fact, I would love to hunt an animal and eat the meat of that animal someday myself. As I mentioned, you don't need to be completely vegan or completely non-vegan. You can do a little bit of both, and that's completely fine. And so in general, I just want to talk about when do I find it okay to break my vegan diet. The places where I'm okay not following the vegan diet is either when a friend has made something for me, or we're going to a place where there is something known about that place that is super famous and it is non-vegan, I will definitely go try it out. And so these occasions, I think it is completely okay for me to not stick to the vegan diet. Before we move on to everybody's favorite topic, protein, I want to talk about a couple of other benefits that I've noticed while being on the vegan diet. I'm not really sure whether it is because of a vegan diet, and I want to be completely clear of attributing these benefits to the vegan diet, but a few other things that I've noticed while being on this diet are I have more energy, I do recover faster, and generally I'm just a little bit more lighter, if that makes any sense. Not weight wise, but just generally how you're feeling. You just feel a little bit more active, and there's a bit of a pep in your step and things like that. You're not really feeling lethargic all of the time. Again, I don't want to attribute this completely to a vegan diet because correlation is not equal to causation, but this is something I've experienced as being on a vegan diet. What about protein though? Oh, the good old friend protein. As it stands, protein is all derived, all of the animal sources of protein are derived from plants. They are either indirect or direct consumers of plants. So all of that protein is being generated from plants. In fact, there was a really nice quote about this one person who was featured in the Game Changers, where he said, if you ever want to be as strong as a gorilla, have you ever seen a gorilla eat meat? They don't. I'm generally aware of the macros of the foods that I eat and I consume. So the proteins that I get are from sources like lentils, beans, chickpeas, tofu, seeds and nuts. And of course, the best friend of any athlete, protein powders. And they do make them in vegan alternatives now. I was in fact trying to add muscle to my frame since December up until now, where COVID hit me in January, and since then I've been a little hesitant to go to the gym, and since I haven't been getting as much exercise, I lost some of the muscle that I had added on in those couple of months. But that's just life throwing things at your way. And so what are some of the challenges that I've had on this diet? Number one is the social angle, because if you and a bunch of friends are ordering something to eat, it is every single time everybody is on the same page except, oh, there's Mayur who is on a vegan diet, and everybody starts to be very considerate about what is something that Mayur can eat, and can we order from this place? Do they have something vegan? Can we order from that place? Do they have something vegan? Or if we're going out, then again the same considerations, do they have something vegan or not? And the way I see it, I am literally the most non-picky person, as long as it is something that is vegetarian and doesn't include some butter or milk added in there. I am literally the most non-picky person, and I'll eat literally anything. But that is one of the things that proves challenging when you're on this vegan diet, is just the social pressure of not wanting to disappoint your friends and to not be the sore thumb that always sticks out. The other one has been an iron deficiency. When I was doing my blood work, I realized that my blood iron is quite a bit low. And this is something that can happen on a vegan diet because you're not consuming heme iron, which comes through animal sources and is much easier to digest, although that seems to have its own drawbacks. But when I was listening to this podcast by David Sinclair, who's a longevity researcher, he mentioned that low iron levels in the blood might be a good thing. But anyway, I always just supplement with an iron supplement, which I take almost every day. Okay, so in conclusion, one person, you can make a difference if you care about animals and you're doing it for that cause. Do the math and you'll figure this one out for yourself. Number two, you don't really need to go absolutely extreme with it. You can take it one step at a time. You can start out small and then slowly build up to a point where you are comfortable, and that does not mean that you need to be 100% vegan. That's why I classify myself as mostly whole food plant-based. And lastly, try and do some blood work before and after you make a switch, and try and see over a period of 2 or 3 weeks what is the actual difference that you might be able to notice by switching to this diet. If you are able to see those benefits, then it may be worthwhile for you to stick on it longer and for you to push a little bit further and go a little longer in a week being on a whole food plant-based diet. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. If you're new here, definitely get subscribed and follow me on Instagram. I'm posting here on a weekly schedule. Until next time, take care and stay safe.